right? So after completion of classification of white fibers, next session is about corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is biggest commissure, or it is biggest band of white matter which bridges the two cerebral hemispheres, right? This is one point, and which connects the neocortex. Clear? This is another point. Then fibers of corpus callosum are the axons of pyramidal cells. Axons of pyramidal cells. Clear? Then this corpus callosum connecting the two cerebral hemispheres that we have seen. Imagine this is one cerebral hemisphere and this is another cerebral hemisphere, right? Separated by one fissure in the center. What is that? Median sagittal fissure or median cerebral fissure, but it will not separate totally. In the middle part there is a C-shaped band is there. That band what we are calling corpus callosum. This is that corpus callosum, right? When you make a section along the midline, we can observe this structure what we are calling corpus callosum, right? So what are the parts of corpus callosum? I am removing this because I need to show some relations which are present intimately above the corpus callosum. That's what I am removing this. What is this? I am removing cingulum. I am removing cingulum here, right? So this is corpus callosum. What are the parts of it? This bend is there. This bend is genu, and this lower narrowest part, and it is connecting with lamina terminalis. This part, this narrow part, what we are calling rostrum, and this middle part, what we are calling body or trunk. Body or trunk, and the posterior part, this part what we are calling splenium. Splenium, and the length of this corpus callosum is 10 centimeters, right? Then if you see the distance between frontal pole and genu, it is around 4 centimeters. And if you observe distance between the splenium and occipital pole, it is around 6 centimeters, right? Then what are the relations? That means what are the structures which are present immediately above the convex superior surface? Convex superior surface. Actually, immediately above the convex superior surface, you can observe some amount of grey matter which is covering this. So what is this grey matter called? Indusium griseum. This word you have heard. What is this? Indusium griseum. This indusium griseum covers the superior surface. Of course, anteriorly it is continuous with the paraterminal gyrus, and the posteriorly it continues with the gyrus which is present over the splenium. What is that? Gyrus facialaris. Gyrus facialaris here. Of course, it is inferiorly, it is entering into the parahippocampal gyrus, and it is connected with the dentaire gyrus, right? So I am not going in detailed description about this. At this session, what is the superior relation? What is this? Indusium griseum. Indusium griseum. Within that indusium griseum, you can find four bands of white matter. Those 4 bands of white matter will be present within the substance of indusium griseum. Those bands what we are calling medial and lateral. Longitudinal stria. Medial and longitudinal stria. Medial longitudinal stria and lateral longitudinal stria. Of course, 4 means what? One side 2 and another side 2. One side medial and lateral longitudinal stria. This side also medial and lateral longitudinal stria. Right? If you want to see that, I have to make a section like this. I have to make coronal section, and you have to see from the front. You have to make a section, and if you see from the front, you can observe indusium, griseum along with stria, medial and lateral longitudinal stria. So let me take the diagram. So this is medial surface. Of course, this is cerebral hemisphere, right and left. So what is this? Immediately below this, corpus callosum. Is it? Above the corpus callosum, indusium, griseum. So this is indusium, griseum. This is the grey matter. This grey matter is indusium, griseum. Within this substance, within the substance of grey matter, you can find two bands on either side, medial and lateral, medial and lateral longitudinal stria. These are stria, right? So these are the immediate relations in the central part of corpus callosum, right? Just above this indusium, griseum, what we can found? We can found two arteries here, right and left, anterior cerebral arteries. Is it? So right and left anterior cerebral arteries will be like this. Clear? So anterior cerebral arteries, right? Then if you see still above, what you can found? There is a fold of dura mater, what we call falx cerebri, with one vein will be there. What is that vein? Actually it is not vein, it is a sinus, inferior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal sinus, right? So these are the structures present in relation with the central part of corpus callosum. And what about on either side, this part and this part? This is also corpus callosum, no? What is this part and what is this part? There is a one gyrus which is present here. What is this gyrus? This gyrus. That means, what is this gyrus? Cingulate gyrus, is it? So cingulate gyrus. So this part is cingulate gyrus. Clear? On either side, cingulate gyrus, separated by one sulcus. What is that sulcus? Callosal sulcus. Actually there will be one sulcus here. This sulcus separates the callosum, corpus callosum and cingulate gyrus. Right? What is that sulcus? Callosal sulcus. Right? So these are the relations of superior surface of corpus callosum. Right? Then we will discuss about what are the inferior surface relations. Actually in the posterior part, the inferior surface of corpus callosum is in relation with crura of fornix. It is intimately related. But in the anterior part, these columns and the concave inferior surface separated by some distance. This distance, this gap filled by or connected by one septum. That septum is bilaminar fold of nervous tissue. That septum is bilaminar fold of nervous tissue. That bilaminar fold of nervous tissue, what we call septum pellucidum or septum lucidum. This is septum pellucidum or septum lucidum. So indirectly what I am telling? In the central part, inferior surface of corpus callosum, it is in relation with fornix and septum lucidum. Right, in the central part. right? Then on either side of the septum pellucidum, what will be there? Ventricle. Which ventricle? Lateral ventricle, right? So to show that lateral ventricle, I am removing this part. Is it okay? So this is medial surface of cerebral hemisphere. Right? Of course, corpus callosum. This is corpus callosum. Right? Now, below this corpus callosum, you can found the structure like this. What is the structure? This is lateral ventricle. This is lateral ventricle. If you see in the center, you cannot see this lateral ventricle. Just if you make little lateral to the midline, that time you can see the cavity here. This cavity, what we are calling lateral ventricle. Right? Now we will see the relations of remaining part of corpus callosum. See here, what is this? This is genu. Posterior to the genu, what is there? Anterior horn of lateral ventricle. This is anterior horn of lateral ventricle. And what is this part? Rostrum. Above the rostrum, what is there? Inferior surface of anterior horn of lateral ventricle. Is it? So, genu forms the anterior boundary of anterior horn of lateral ventricle. Rostrum forms floor of anterior horn of lateral ventricle. Right? And what is this part? Trunk or body. This trunk forms the roof of central part of lateral ventricle. Right? So these are the relations of genu, rostrum, body. Right? Now we will see the relations of splenium. Relations of splenium. I hope you understood. Genu forms the anterior boundary for the anterior horn of lateral ventricle. Rostrum forms the floor of anterior horn of lateral ventricle. And body forms the roof for the central part of lateral ventricle. Clear? Now, if you take the splenium overhangs on the, what is this structure? Pineal gland, and here thalamus will be there. You must be aware of it. This is thalamus. In the posterior part, pulvinar part of thalamus will be there. Pulvinar part of thalamus. So, the splenium overhangs over the thalamus, pineal gland, and what is this? Superior colliculus of midbrain. So it is overhang over all these structures. Remember one by one. Pulvinar part of thalamus, pineal gland, and superior colliculus. Clear? And along with that, in between the ependymal lining of third ventricle and the splenium, there is one fissure is there. This fissure, what we are calling transverse fissure. Transverse fissure. Through that fissure, there will be one structure, one bilaminar fold of pia mater. Bilaminar fold of pia mater, which extends in between, what is this? Fornix and ependymal lining of third ventricle. So this bilaminar fold of pia mater, what we call tela choroidea, which contains posterior choroidal vessels, and in the posterior most part you can observe one vein within this fissure. this vein, what we call great cerebral vein of Galen. Great cerebral vein of Galen. Of course, this great cerebral vein of Galen opens into straight sinus. That you must be studied in the gross anatomy of head and neck. Dural venous sinuses. Right? So, straight sinus will be there. It is present at the fusion point of falx cerebri and tentorium cerebelli. Falx cerebri and tentorium cerebelli, there is one fusion point is there. Within that fusion point, there will be straight sinus. Into that straight sinus, this great cerebral vein of Galen will open. Clear? So, that is about relations of splenium. Clear? So, now relations completed. Next, what are the fibers passing through the genu? What are the fibers passing through the body? What are the fibers passing through the splenium? And what are the fibers passing through the rostrum? These things we have to see. For that, what we have to do? We have to make section, horizontal section along the corpus callosum. That to which part? Along the splenium and genu. That means I am taking the horizontal section like this and I am seeing from above. I am taking the horizontal section and I am looking from above. So, how it looks like? I can see both cerebral hemispheres. Just imagine these are cerebral hemispheres, both cerebral hemispheres. What I am taking? I am taking horizontal section at the level of splenium and genu of corpus callosum. If I take section like this and if I see from the above, how it looks like. See this? Here, this is one cerebral hemisphere and this is another cerebral hemisphere. This is lateral sulcus. When you take the section like this, lateral sulcus also will be there, no? So, this is lateral sulcus here. So, this is lateral sulcus. So, it will be like this, is it or not? So, when I take the section at this level, this is genu, is it? From the genu, some fibers passing forward and laterally, they are going like this. So, see here, some fibers connecting frontal lobes. See here, these fibers are connecting frontal lobes. Right? These are the fibers passing through the genu and connecting frontal lobes. Right? So, these fibers are looking like fork. That's what these fibers, what we are calling forceps minor. Forceps minor. Right? Then, next, behind the genu, what you can find? Of course, you can see the body here, then splenium. But in the cut section, we are taking at this level, so that you can see the septum pellucidum, then anterior horn of lateral ventricle. So, here this is septum pellucidum, right? This is fornix. Here you can find anterior horn of lateral ventricle. Is it? This is anterior horn of lateral ventricle. Clear? Then below this fornix, here what is there? Of course tila choroidea is there. Below the tila choroidea third ventricle is there. So here I am drawing small part. This is, just imagine this is tila choroidea. Below the tila choroidea what is there? Third ventricle. So this is third ventricle, right? On either side of third ventricle you can found one largest grey matter which is part of the diencephalon. What is this? Thalamus, right? Just lateral to this horn, anterior horn of lateral ventricle, you can found caudate nucleus, caudate nucleus, right? Here lentiform nucleus and claustrum. Here lentiform nucleus and claustrum. Don't worry about these structures. I will tell you in the diencephalon some structures and in the basal ganglion some structures, right? So this is the structure if you take horizontal section. Clear? Now actually when you are taking section at the level of genu and splenium, you cannot see the body, right? It is present above, but for our convenience I am drawing dotted lines. That means imagine in that region some fibers passing through the body. So I am drawing dotted lines. Just imagine this is body, right? Fibers passing through the body. These fibers what we are calling truncal fibers. Truncal fibers. Trunk means what? Body. They are passing through the body. So those fibers passing horizontally like this, right? When they are passing horizontally, the fibers which are present in the corona radiata and internal capsule, they intersect these fibers. Very simple, don't confuse. See here, these truncal fibers, that means fibers which are passing through the trunk of the corpus callosum, they are passing horizontally like this, and these fibers, corona radiata fibers and internal capsule fibers, they are passing downwards like this, right? So these fibers and these fibers, they intersect with each other, right? Understood? So now I am drawing here horizontal fibers and some intersecting fibers. Some fibers are intersecting, no? Those fibers I am drawing here. Clear? Then fibers passing through the splenium. Fibers passing through the splenium. So fibers passing through the splenium, just imagine this is splenium, posterior part. The fibers passing through the splenium, they projected backwards into the occipital lobe. That means they connects occipital lobes, and this is also looking like fork. That's what this arrangement what we are calling forceps major. Forceps major, right? This forceps major, just lateral to the forceps major, you can identify posterior horn of lateral ventricle. So when the section pass through this, you can observe posterior horn here. So I am drawing posterior horn. Actually I have to draw with blue color, but for differentiation purpose I am drawing with other color. So this is posterior horn. This is posterior horn. Why I am drawing posterior horn? Because of this forceps major, some invagination or indentation you can observe in the posterior horn of lateral ventricle. That indentation what we call bulb. What is this? Bulb. Clear? So that is about forceps major. Then some truncal fibers and some of the splenial fibers. They forms roof and lateral wall of posterior horn, and they forms lateral part of roof of inferior horn. Right? Those fibers what we are calling tapetum. What is it? Tapetum. Don't confuse. Some fibers from the trunk, otherwise some truncal fibers, some splenial fibers forms roof and lateral wall for the posterior horn, lateral part of the roof of inferior horn. Right? Those fibers what we are calling tapetum. Tapetum. Right? So see here, these truncal fibers. So these are truncal fibers. The tapetum thickness is around 2 centimeters. Right? Of course, some contribution will be there by the splenial fibers also. Clear? So this band, what we call tapetum. And what is this band? Forceps major. And what is this band? Forceps minor. Right? And what is the importance of this tapetum? The tapetal fibers are not intersected by internal capsule fibers. That means corona radiata fibers. They will not intersect. Right? So that is about different fibers which are passing through the corpus callosum. Right? Here some important things are there. I already told you corpus callosum connects neocortical areas. This corpus callosum contains 300 million nerve fibers, which contains 300 million nerve fibers. Because of this immense traffic of impulses, it can able to transfer the information from one hemisphere to another hemisphere. For what? For bilateral response. For bilateral response, it could able to transfer. Right? And these fibers connects almost all areas except few regions. Actually, this corpus callosum fibers connects almost all areas of right cerebral hemisphere to left cerebral hemisphere except area number 17. What is that? Primary visual area, and area number 312, but not total. Within the area number 312, there will be some area which is representing the hand and some area which is representing the foot. Those areas are not interconnected with one cerebral hemisphere to another cerebral hemisphere. Remaining all areas are connected by these commissural fibers. Right? This is important thing, you have to remember this. Clear? So that is about different fibers which are connecting the cerebral hemisphere. That means one cerebral hemisphere to another cerebral hemisphere. Now we will see the applied importance. Before going to applied importance, first we will see what is the function of corpus callosum. Function of corpus callosum is interhemispheric transfer of information, which is essential for the bilateral response. This is main function. If you want to describe under subheadings, first one is transfer of learning process. Actually, memory will be formed from the sensory input and motor output. This memory will be confined to one cerebral hemisphere, but this information will be transferred to one cerebral hemisphere to another cerebral hemisphere. Actually, let me give you one example. See, I am right-handed person. So, my left cerebral hemisphere is dominant hemisphere. Of course, if anyone is left-handed person, for him right cerebral hemisphere will be dominant. Right? So, for me, left cerebral hemisphere is dominant. Actually, this learning process will be confined to my left cerebral hemisphere. So, my left cerebral hemisphere will give commands to my right hand to write something, so that I can write with right hand. But if there is any damage to my right hand, that means my right hand some cut injury is there. So, at that time I cannot write with right hand. But some situation will come, at that time I should write. At that time what I will do? I will try to write with my left hand. Even though it is not that much precise, but I can write. How could I write? I didn't train to my left hand, even though I could write, because the information from my left cerebral hemisphere transferred to right cerebral hemisphere, the motor commands came to my left hand, then I could write. What is happening here? That learning process, that memory is transferring from one cerebral hemisphere to another cerebral hemisphere. Even though it is not that much precise, but I could write it. So, memory transfer has been taken place because of corpus callosum. Clear? Then, another thing, transfer of speech area. Actually, speech areas, area number 44, 45 and 39, 40, 22. These areas are responsible for the speech. Is it? Actually, if there is any damage to these areas of dominant hemisphere, at the time person cannot speak. But if it happened in the adult period, he cannot speak. But if it happened before 6 to 8 years of age, at that time that children will not affect much. These areas, these speech areas successfully transferred from left cerebral hemisphere to right cerebral hemisphere. That means one cerebral hemisphere to another cerebral hemisphere, and he will not affect much, and he can speak very fluently and perfectly within few days. What does it mean? These speech areas transferring from one hemisphere to another hemisphere through what? Commissional fiber, especially corpus callosum. Clear? So, these are main functions. And if there is injury, what will happen? First we will see what will happen if there is injury in the genu part, and what will happen if there is injury at the posterior part, at the splenial part, and what happened if there is injury to the total part. If there is injury at the anterior part, which leads to akinetic mutism. That means motor activities will be affected, because this is motor area, right? That means frontal area is mostly motor area. So, akinetic mutism. Kinetic means what? Movements. A means what? No. Okay, no movements. Clear? Then, if injury at the posterior part, it is sensory. Is it? So, he cannot read, but he could write. So, what is this condition called? Alexia. Alexia without agraphia. Without agraphia. Agraphia means what? Unable to write. Right? Alexia means what? Unable to read. In this condition, he cannot read, but he can write. So that's what this is, alexia without agraphia. Clear? So these are the some applied importances. And another one, if you make a section totally like this, that means along the total corpus callosum, if you make a section, at that time what you are doing? You are separating two cerebral hemispheres, right? It may be surgical division or it may be congenital. At that time, person behaves like as if he is having two brains. That syndrome what we call double brain syndrome or split brain syndrome. We can also call as twin brain syndrome, whatever. So that means that particular person, he behaves like as if he is having two brains. What does it mean? Actually, if you learn with right hand, somehow you can able to write with left hand also, but precision must be impaired, but even though you can write it. But in that person, that means who is having split brain syndrome, at that time you have to train for both hands, right? So that condition what we are calling split brain syndrome or double brain syndrome or twin brain syndrome. Clear? Actually, why they will do this? Why surgically they have to dissect this? Actually, to prevent or to make confined epilepsy to one cerebral hemisphere, or to prevent transfer of epileptic focus to the opposite side. Clear? Interestingly, when they undergone the surgery of corpus callosum division, they didn't find any intellectual, behavioral and emotional abnormalities. They are almost normal, right? So this is about corpus callosum. Next session we will discuss about internal capsule.